Hello, everyone. Welcome to this season 2 finale of Let's Talk About Brand. I'm your host, as always, Christine Gritmon, and today I'm also the guest. Why am I the guest? Well, today, honestly, is going to be a short show, the finale of what has been a bit of a strange season. But first, I'm going to lead off by letting you all know we are coming back for season 3. I always take August off of my show. I just like taking August as a time to sort of step back, recharge. Doing the show every week is a lot, and it is incredible. It's like the best thing, the second best part of my week. The best part of my week is actually the chat on Tuesdays, Chat About Brand. That also is coming back for season 3. But the fact is, it is a lot. It's a lot of energy. And so this year has been especially interesting in that regard. So I'm going to look back on this past season a little bit with you all, and I'm going to tell you about some changes I'm making for season 2, which premieres in September. It premieres, in fact, you know what? I should have been prepared with the date here, but as you'll see, that's kind of a hallmark of this season. It's going to come back. The Chat About Brand, which is Tuesdays at noon Eastern, is going to come back on Tuesday, September 6th. And then the show is coming back on Friday, September 9th. But there are going to be some changes. But first, I'm gonna roll back a little bit and talk to you in case you don't know about kind of the history of Let's Talk About Brand and Chat About Brand. So, going way back to April of 2017, I started my first live stream series, Social. Just like Let's Talk About Brand, it was noon Eastern time on Fridays. It was live. It was just on Facebook. And just like Let's Talk About Brand, I interviewed very smart people in the social media world. If there's one thing that I've always known, it's that knowing smart people, knowing great people, and sharing those great people and their wisdom with my network is absolutely my jam. I love interviewing people. One of my favorite things ever is when I interview someone who's been interviewed a lot, like a big thought leader, and I have them say, you know, I've never been asked that question before. That's a great question. In fact, I keep meaning to put together a supercut of guests saying that sort of thing. And also their answers to those great questions. I think that should be kind of an all killer, no filler highlight reel there. So, and part of that came from the fact that before I entered social media, I was a journalist. I am a journalist. I love telling people's stories and encouraging people to tell their own stories. It's the whole point of what I do in personal branding. It's why I love journalism. It's why I love live streaming. And that's why it's always an interview show. That's why it's usually not me up here babbling. I do that on other people's shows. Speaking of which, if you have a show, a live stream, a podcast, a Twitter chat, anything of that sort, I always forget to ask this earlier in the year. If you happen to have an opening, like the first week of September, or rather for something that is going to be released the first week of September, or if you have a very understanding guest around that time frame who you can maybe bump to a later date, I would love to get some hype around early September and the season 3 premiere of Chat About Brand and Let's Talk About Brand. Anyway, going back. So I was doing the show Social for many years. There were a few months where I just kind of stop, but it did keep going, relatively consistently from April 2017 on, but it didn't fully have a shape to it. It was just random smart people I felt like interviewing. The last year that I did it, I did actually do a monthly theme thing where it's like, okay, well, this is LinkedIn month. This is mindset month. This is British invasion month. I did once because, as you may know, I have a lot of wonderful connections in the UK. So I tried themes, didn't really catch on, and it just made planning trickier. I tried stripping the audio and releasing it as a podcast, which everyone had suggested to me forever, but I didn't have the bandwidth to properly promote any of this stuff, so the podcast was kind of dead in the water. A few people listened to it. It didn't really get the results that merited the continued effort. And I gave these efforts a little bit of time to catch on. But then, when I took my step back in August of 2020, this was amazing. 2020 was actually an incredible year for my business because I worked with small business owners at the time. Spoiler alert, that's not really my thing anymore, but at the time that was my target market, and 2020 was actually a great time for that because I helped people save their businesses, or at least, buy a little time so that they could figure out what they wanted to do there. Because 2020 with the pandemic was, of course, the year that people who had been hesitating on getting their businesses online realized that they needed to either do it or say goodbye to their businesses. Hey, Tim and Tim. Oh my goodness, I have both of my Tims here. I love both of my Tims, Tim Sohn and Tim Lewis. I have a great picture with them from Social Media Marketing World 2020. We were on a party bus and I made a Tim sandwich. It was lovely. So I guess it was a Christine sandwich on Tim bread. Anyhow, so I took my step back in August 2020 and I said, what am I actually doing here? I have this opportunity. I'm getting more known. Hey Jim, I'm getting more known. People are seeing who I am. People who don't know me know who I am to a greater degree than ever before. This is great. What do I want to do with this though? Because I've always been throwing spaghetti at the wall. I've always been just kind of doing what feels right, doing what brings value, but where I've always fallen short has been in converting that to actual value to me, beyond the fact that I enjoy it. So that's part of why I was not great at running business. But anyway, I did have a really great moment in 2020 where I said, I need a thing. I need a thing where this is the thing that I'm known for. Christine is the blank thing. I needed to define and refine my personal brand in a bigger, bolder way so that people knew what to come to me for. Not just as clients, but also as, what are they going to ask me to come speak on? What am I going to speak on as a guest on shows? I want to do more speaking on stages. And part of what makes those opportunities happen is really people knowing what they're asking you to do. I know so many brilliant people who I'd love to interview, but I'm not sure what on. So I had that moment where I realized people kept talking to me about my personal brand. Everyone noticed not only the red, but also my face is a huge part of my personal brand, which sounds obvious, but it's really not. My energy, the conversations I have, and just people have been noticing my personal branding for a while. And I looked back and I realized that my favorite part of what I did with my clients, no matter what they do or what they were working on, was always really that personal branding element. So I made a huge change in August 2020. And the way it was a really good and brand leveraged change is because people who have known me for years and years, they forget that I made a big change in August 2020. Or they're like, no, you didn't. This has always been your thing. You've always been personal branding girl. No, I haven't. It was just really effective. It was a really effective shift that was on brand and that fit with the values that I already had as a person and as a public person and as a brand. And it really helped me leverage that change in a way that was impactful, in a way that people saw it and were on board immediately, which is another great thing about having a personal brand that's genuine and based on you, based on who you really are. I changed my logo at that time too. Changed my fonts and my logo. And this logo is actually based on my real life signature. It's not exactly my real life signature, but my real signature has looked an awful lot like this for decades. So anyway, so for August 2020, I said, you know what? When I come back, I'm not coming back and doing this show called Social again. I'm coming back with something new, which of course is Let's Talk About Brand. And I decided, almost as an afterthought, that I'd toss in a Twitter chat, simply because I have gotten a tremendous amount of value, both personally and professionally, from participating in Twitter chats, such as Madeline Sklar's Twitter Smarter chat is kind of the gold standard there. And I'm very proud to be the co-host for her after chat on Twitter Spaces every Thursday. So Madeline was the first person I went to for advice on starting a Twitter chat, but there's other Twitter chats that I've loved participating in, several that are no longer that I miss. I miss Robin Kennedy's email hour. I miss agorapulse had I think it was agency chat. I should really know this. There were just great chats that I miss. I love Brand Plumbing's pop chat. No, Tim, I'm not going to give anyone my PIN number. Though I'm not shy about my date of birth, honestly. So I said, I'm going to put a Twitter chat up, and maybe the Twitter chat will drive people to the live stream. I still considered the live stream the showcase piece. Well, to my great surprise, the chat turned out to be more popular. I still consider the live stream the main event because I really love interviewing these brilliant minds and experts. I think that it's very educational. I love doing it. So there was never a thought of discontinuing it, but the chat is more popular, and it's interesting how they have both brought different audiences to me. So moving on. Did that. 2020 to 2021 was season 1. We got some incredible guests. It's all there on my YouTube channel. You can see the full lineup. It's also on my website, gritmon.com/let's talk about brand. You can see all of them ever. It's also on Facebook. That's another change that I made. Social used to be Facebook only. For Let's Talk About Brand, I've always been on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and YouTube. I was originally going to be Amazon Live also, but that kind of fell through because I didn't know how to leverage it properly, and I didn't have the bandwidth to focus on it. A couple incredible things happened. First of all, the idea of let's get known for a thing really happened. Another thing, which I actually owe my friends Andrew and Pete an email on because they want to write about it, is the fact that I had been doing all sorts of different content on different things. I had a whole bunch of content series of various sorts that just kind of fell flat. I was on this hamster wheel. I was just spinning and spinning and getting nowhere. I felt like I'm doing this great stuff. Why is nobody seeing it? I decided my full content strategy from August 2020 on was going to be this show and the chat. That's it. No follow-up blog, no nothing. Just those two things. I said I'm going to do fewer things better. Suddenly people thought I was doing more because they were actually seeing it. This is the magic of kind of finding your thing and rolling with it and doing something, focusing on something and doing it better rather than doing a million little things. People truly thought I was doing way more. They said, suddenly I'm seeing you everywhere. My goodness, you're doing so much. No, I was doing less. I have been guesting on a lot of things, so maybe it's partially that. But that's because I had visibility, and I had visibility not because I was doing more, but because I was doing something focused and better. So, season 1 was great. Yay, season 1. Season 2 started in fall of 2021, which feels like a really long time ago. And it was great. It went well. And then towards the very end of that, towards the very end of 2021, I realized it was time for a job. Previously, I had been self-employed as Christine Gritmon Inc. since May of 2016. As I said, 2020 was great for my business. 2021 was an unmitigated disaster. 2021, I will straight up own it, terrible for my business. And for 5 years, I had wondered, when will I know when it's time to call it? And I've had, I think, 3 moments in my life where it felt like a message from the universe just dropped on me like a cartoon anvil. And this was one of those moments. It was the day before Thanksgiving, 2021, of all days. And I realized, I gotta get a job. Now, if you've been self-employed, this can feel like such failure. Even if you know it's going to enable you to do bigger and better things, even though you know all the good things about it, it can feel like you failed. And it feels like it looks like you failed. So I'm just going to say straight up, there's a difference between being great at something and being great at running a business on that something. I had all the resources in the world to help me. I know so many brilliant people who were dying to help me learn how to run my business better. I just didn't have the bandwidth to manage all of it. So finally, it all came to a head end of November. And I had that cartoon anvil moment right before guesting on someone's live stream. Can't even remember who it was, but I can look back at my calendar, but right before guesting on someone's live stream. So I pulled it together. The show must go on. By the way, I'm not faking now. I really am this happy right now, but I did fake it that day. Actually, not really. Once I get into the groove and I was talking to people about things that I love and was excited about and feel like I'm great at, that actually... Okay, so I pulled it together. I did the live stream. It was great. Right after that, I fell apart. I was just sobbing my face off. And I said, because there's a mourning to it, mourning. There, you kind of are mourning the loss of, spoiler alert, I did not lose my business, but it felt like it. It felt like waving the white flag and saying, okay, I give up. So I said, I'm just gonna enjoy Thanksgiving. I'm not gonna worry about looking at anything until Friday. But I did, because I was like, well, I don't know what I'm looking for because I don't actually want to be looking for work. So I don't know what I'm looking for. I did know two things. It needed to be a company that would allow me to keep and embrace and nurture and grow my personal brand, which thankfully is easier to find now than it used to be. And number two, it had to be someplace where I knew people who worked there or who had worked there who called it the best place they'd ever worked. Bonus points if it was someplace where people who had previously been self-employed then worked and said it was a great job. So that really brought me to a few companies. It brought me to 3 companies were rattling around in my brain. HubSpot, which is an incredible company. LinkedIn, also incredible. And agorapulse. Agorapulse was literally the only place I had applied for a job at all in the previous 5 years, because a job came up at some point a few years ago, and I said, well, I can't not. And I didn't get it. The people who got it were fantastic. But I was just like, yeah. So I said, you know what? Let's just take a peek at what's out there. And the first place I looked was the agorapulse career section. And again, I didn't know what kind of job I was going to be looking for, especially since I felt unqualified for a lot of digital marketing jobs because I technically had never held one with a real company. I only had the experiences that I had given myself. So I went to the agorapulse career section, not knowing what I was looking for. And there was a job that sounded like it was written for me. I was qualified for it, but it was big and challenging, so I wasn't overqualified for it. It sounded like all of the things that I loved, which is, interacting with people, telling stories, writing. It was a journalism and editing job, but then also all being, having your finger on the pulse of social media, knowing what's going on, and helping build a community too. As you may have noticed, I am very social on social media. And so this really fit really nicely. And I looked at it, I'm like, So I DM'd Deb Mitchell, who I knew worked for agorapulse, on social media. I said, do you know anything about this? Is this like on your team or something? She said, oh my God, call me. Now remember, I was crying my eyes out still at this point. So I was like, I'll call you Friday. But I called her Friday. She said, you have to apply for this job. It was indeed on her team. She was not the hiring manager, but she said, I'm going to let the hiring manager know that your application's coming. Get it in today, because I think they're about to start interviewing. Guys, it was the only job I applied for. I had conversations with people at HubSpot and LinkedIn who were very generous with their time, and they talked to me about these other companies and positions I was going to apply for. When it came down to it, I really wanted this one, and I felt like I was going to get it. And I got it. Senior editor of the brand new Social Media Pulse community that agorapulse was launching. So, one of the first things a lot of people said to me when they found out I was getting a job. Oh, that's another thing. I wanted to get a job that I honestly would enjoy more than a full roster of clients. I said, if I get a job, I need to make sure that if my business starts taking off, I won't be tempted to leave the job. I'll be tempted to figure out how I can make them work together, which is precisely where I am now. I'm not leaving my job anytime remotely soon, but things are perking up for me. It's a really good job. It's really fun, you guys. So, a lot of people said to me, all right, so you're going to stop your live stream and your chat? You really should. That's a lot of time. You don't need to be putting all that energy into something that's not paying you, all of that. And I didn't even know. It was just not a possibility for me. I love doing this show. I love doing this chat. And I love getting to geek out on personal branding. And I love having it be my thing. So this is branding work for me. So I said, you know what? No, I'm not going to stop doing it. And I was really on top of things at the beginning. My job started in January. And by the end of the first week of January, I had pretty much all my guests for the show booked out through mid-March. I was not usually that on the ball, but I was. And I had my chat questions programmed in mostly through like mid-March, because I program in the chat questions and then I show up live with my answers and with engaging with people. And so I was really on the ball for the whole first quarter of 2022. and I'd planned ahead and it was smart. And then Social Media Pulse actually launched at that mid-March time point. We launched at Social Media Marketing World on March 14th. And ever since then, I've been kind of limping from week to week. I did not plan ahead again for the back half of the spring for second quarter of 2022. Plus, I had travel. I have had more travel this year than I ever had before, and that is not a required part of my job. It is something I beg for each time. I'm like, I want to go to this place. Hey, you guys should send me. Here's the business case for why you should send me. Here's how I'll bring that benefit back to Social Media Pulse. And I love it. I'm hooked. I love going to events. I always loved going to events, even when I had to pay for them out of my own pocket. And so it's been a year of a lot of travel, and what I'm working on balancing is, first of all, how to travel while also doing my job and making sure that I get content for Social Media Pulse and I get signups for Social Media Pulse. You should sign up for Social Media Pulse if you haven't already. But I also balancing this, and if something had to fall off during that time period, it was this, because as I said, this show doesn't pay me. I get no money from this. And so, and you know, in terms of time is money, I guess that means that I'm almost paying to do it. So thank you for those of you who have stood by me these past couple months as I limped along from week to week. There were weeks when I had pre-recorded shows, which will always happen on occasion. There were weeks when I barely showed up at all. There were weeks when I didn't show up at all, though I tried to give you a heads up on those. And yeah, so this is the final show of season 2, the limping week to week. I'm already ahead of the game for the fall. Definitely by like mid to late August, I'll have everything set through the holidays for season 3. And in fact, in November, I'm going to start getting my head on straight regarding the spring season. But there are going to be some changes. And the changes are really exciting. And the changes are because exciting things are happening for me. First of all, as I mentioned, of course, I am senior editor for Social Media Pulse, and I'm now going to be conducting a live panel interview with experts on a given topic every single month in the Social Media Pulse community. So that's exciting. I'm going to continue going to events a lot. So that's going to be more exciting content that I'm going to be capturing. I kind of got into a little bit of a rut with my first few events this season. I created some good content at events, but now I want to start thinking bigger and bolder and bring more different types of content to Social Media Pulse when I go to events. So that's the Pulse stuff. Separately, agorapulse, which is the parent company of Social Media Pulse, but the operating teams are a little bit different. I'm actually going to be doing 2 shows as agorapulse. And those are debuting this month in August. They're going to be on the agorapulse social media channels. One of them debuts next week, and it's going to be the first week of every month, and that is called How I Do My Job. I'm going to be interviewing social media practitioners about particular elements of, there'll be a subject theme every month. So next week, I'm actually talking to Alexa Heinrich. You heard it here first, talking to Alexa Heinrich about education. She does social media for a college, and she, of course, is also herself involved in educating people about digital accessibility. So that's that. Then there's a second show that's going to be the 3rd week of every month for agorapulse. And I'm not sure if I should announce it here, you guys. I think you might have to check out the agorapulse channels to find out about that one. But that's 2 shows a month for agorapulse, 1 show a month for Social Media Pulse. So that's 3 weeks out of every 4 right there. And I can't announce this yet, but I have another brand that I'm discussing creating some new series with, and that is extremely exciting. In addition to all of that, I just got approved as part of Adweek Magazine's new creator network. So I'm hoping that that leads to some content creation stuff too. So essentially, I'm moving my personal brand into more of a content creator and thought leader space. You can still bring me onto things just as Christine Gritmon Inc., not as Social Media Pulse, not as agorapulse, just as me. Christine Gritmon Inc. is still her own dang thing, and I'm trying to figure out how everything that I do, I can try to leverage it to benefit all 3 of these hats that I wear. Now, as for Let's Talk About Brand and Chat About Brand, here is the plan for September onwards, and we'll see how this goes this year. So first of all, Chat About Brand, nothing changes. Nothing really changes. It'll be Tuesdays at noon Eastern time. It'll be a Twitter chat, the same as it always is. I'm going to continue to show up live for it because it's the best hour of my week, quite honestly. And if I can't some week, I'll still be able to kind of prepare things for that week, and I'll just lean on, maybe Jeremy and Abby, who already help me out with the chat sometimes. Maybe I'll just lean on them a little more heavily on those weeks. But I'll always be honest with you about if I'm there or not. This past week, I was unexpectedly in the woods with my son. Not going to get into that whole story, but it was fun. And I was honest about the fact that I'd be spotty because I had spotty internet. So the questions were scheduled, they went out, I read everyone's answers, I went back later and tried to engage a little bit. So again, Chat About Brand, still Tuesdays, still noon Eastern, still gonna be great. And then I'm actually going to introduce a Twitter space because there have been a few weeks where I just didn't have my questions together for a chat, and I said, you know what? Let's just have a space, have a conversation. I've been co-hosting Twitter Spaces with Madeline Sklar every week, as I said. And so rather than replacing the chat with the space, because I don't want to do that because people can participate in different ways. Not everyone is in a situation on Tuesday at noon where they can listen to or speak on a Twitter Space and they have stuff they want to say. So instead of replacing the chat, I'm going to have an additional Twitter Space. And I thought about where to put it. I was like, I could do it right after the chat, but people can't give me 2 straight hours every Tuesday. It's just, that's a lot to ask. What Madeline does is she does it several hours later. So her chat is at 1 on Thursdays Eastern time, and then she has her spaces at 5. But I decided I didn't want to do that either. So what I'm doing, tentative, watch my Twitter, but I'm pretty sure what I'm going to do is stick to my noon time frame that I love so much and have a Twitter Space on Wednesdays. And again, that is something where if I have to miss a week, that's unfortunate, but I can get people to co-host. I can get people to guest host. So I think I'm going to lean on that more heavily. If there's a week when I am busy because of travel, and there's a lot of travel coming up in my world, I can just bring on a co-host. I need to lean on my community a little bit more in that regard, but it will almost always be me, and I will be welcoming you guys up to talk, and it'll be the same topic for the week as the chat was. And it's great because it's after the chat. It's a day after the chat. So we can discuss some of the answers that people had. We can, if the person who gave that answer is in the space, they can take the mic and expound upon it. So that's going to be a really exciting new addition. But then also, hey, my show, Let's Talk About Brand, where I interview people. That's still going to be Fridays. But first of all, it's not going to be live anymore. I'm going to still conduct it as though it were live. No editing, just boom, one shot. There may still be mistakes even though it's not live. I'm just owning that. You know what? Because live is how I thrive. I don't have time to edit, but this will help because I can batch create. So I'm going to be bringing the show in the fall, non-live, but still releasing on Fridays. Also, instead of streaming it everywhere at once, on Facebook, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, all of which, by the way, I get way more views on replays than I do live, I think I'm going to make it just YouTube. I'm still looking into that, but I think what I'm going to do with the other platforms is just, promote this more heavily on there and drive traffic to my YouTube channel. I get almost no views on YouTube because I haven't invested in growing a community there, but I've been doing video for enough years. It's about time I start developing a real YouTube community. So if you don't already follow me on YouTube, please do. youtube.com/c/Christine Gritmon Inc. Yeah, that's it. I'll put it in the post as well. And I'm going to try the stripping the audio and releasing it as a podcast thing again. But I'm going to take that a lot more seriously too. I'm actually in conversation with a few podcasting networks. So I can start already with a sponsor and ad partner. Speaking of which, if anyone wants to sponsor or partner with me for season 3 of Let's Talk About Brand, let's talk. I'm going to be picky about sponsors. I need it to be something that is on brand and that I legitimately want to present to my audience. But if you're interested in sponsoring season 3, let's talk. It's going to be a YouTube series that I'm going to promote way more heavily on all my social channels. It's going to be a podcast. The podcast will release Mondays. Basically, you'll be getting me almost every day of the week. Podcast Monday of the previous week's interview. Tuesday, chat about brand. Wednesday, space. Thursday, nothing in particular besides, clips, promotions. I'll figure out what I'm doing Thursdays. And then Friday, the show, the pre-recorded show. This sounds like more work. The interesting thing is, because of some of the systems I'm putting in place, it will be less work than it is now. So, please do reach out. Let me know if you can hook me up with any sponsorships. Let me know if you want to partner. Let me know if there's guests you want to see. And without any further ado, and this went way longer than I thought it would, but I can't end this show without answering some questions, because on my chat on Tuesday, my last question is always if you have any questions for the guest, and the guest is me. Also, my live friends who are here, if you have any questions you'd like to ask, hit me. But let me see what we have here. So one of them was, Maiko wants to know, can you talk a bit about naming your audience as a part of branding? Like some people call their audience lifers. A lot of the YouTubers my son listens to do that. Their communities have a name. I don't have one for my community. I don't know what to call it. I feel like a lot of times those names emerge. Those names often emerge from the community itself. Lady Gaga's Monsters, for example. I'm not sure. I mean, Christina Garnett has her Hub fans. I think that's really cool. That's not her personal brand. That's HubSpot, but still. Tim Lewis says the Brandos. I'm gaining a little weight. I don't want to call myself Brando. I am a bit of an auteur. But yeah, so I think that it's a cool thing. I think that anything you can do that brands things is a good thing. And I think that certainly increases a feeling of brand affinity, to borrow a term from Madeline Sklar's Twitter chat, Twitter Smarter, yesterday, where Christina Garnett was the guest. Brand affinity, I think it can certainly increase that. So I would actually love to have a name for my community, but I don't. But I think it's generally a good practice. I think it's fascinating, but I think that you can't put the cart before the horse. I think the community has to establish itself as its own entity and really clearly be something that functions around you but outside you. You know, people are making connections with each other. You could be in the woods one week with your son unexpectedly and not even really show up, and they'd still show up for each other for that conversation. So I'm there. I just don't know what we're going to call ourselves, but I think it's generally a really cool practice, and it's a nice milestone. Just don't try to force it in advance. No, not a gritty, Tim, but thanks. And this one was just sweet. Now Marketing Group, Julia, who is a lovely human being, she said, and she has an article on Social Media Pulse today. What? She said, maybe this is less question, more of a remark, but why are you so wonderful? I will tell you why, Julia, and it's the same reason you're so wonderful. I take the positivity that comes my way and I try to share it, is really what it comes down to. I recognize how fortunate I am, how blessed I am, and I let joy lead me. And I've stopped hiding my gifts, and that's going to be a bigger and bigger theme going forward, because that doesn't help people, and I want to help people. It feels good, and I am so excited. The best part of my job at Social Media Pulse, and the best part of my job at Christine Gritmon Inc., is the ability to highlight other people and share their brilliance with other people. I'm not the star of Let's Talk About Brand, except this week, I guess. I'm not the star. My guests are the stars. I'm not the star of the chat. My participants are the stars of the chat. The Twitter space is not going to be the Christine show. It's going to be have a conversation together, and I'm going to hand people the mic. So I'd say, honestly, that's why I'm so wonderful, Julia, because I surround myself with smart, wonderful people, and I let their brilliance elevate all of us. Jonathan wants to know, when you worked through these decisions, what ideas and concepts did you not decide on? One thing that was a real bummer is every name I wanted for this new show and this new kind of brand of mine, of the Chat About Brand and Let's Talk About Brand, every name I really wanted was taken. So that was very frustrating. And my brother's an intellectual property lawyer, so I'm conscious of, not invading on other people's turf. Interestingly, there was something called Brand Chat that had not been a thing in a long time, and now I'm friends with the people who used to run it. So I could just take that probably if I asked them if we could partner, but I'm not going to. So in fact, I'm encouraging them to relaunch it because I'm a big believer in there's enough room for everyone. It's not a slice of the same pie and then there's less left for all. No, it's a bakery. There's lots of pie. People can go to more than one Twitter chat. Most people do. So I think they should start Brand Chat up again. Have there be a reason I couldn't use the name. But yeah, so names were a big thing. Also figuring out if I was going to just talk or if I was going to have guests, that wasn't a lot to consider because I love talking to guests. I really had to see if the concept had legs. So I did a huge brain dump where I was like, how many different ways can I spin this topic every week? What guests can I have on and what could they talk about regarding branding? And then once I had a ton of ideas, I said, okay, this definitely has legs. Pie, yes. So that was part of it. Yeah, I'm not sure. I can't really remember what I didn't decide on because I've rejected it and I put so much energy into what I did decide on. But at the same time, this is certainly not my final brand incarnation. Things will always change. Okay, so that's what I want to talk to you guys about. Make sure to tune in that first full week of September for the relaunched Chat About Brand, the brand new Twitter Space, the relaunched Let's Talk About Brand, and the brand new Let's Talk About Brand podcast. These will hopefully all have sponsors and partnerships, and then I have all my new shows, so really stay with me on social. August is going to be a month full of announcements. It's going to be a very exciting time. So I'm so grateful to have you all along for the ride. I'm so grateful to be able to continue bringing you Let's Talk About Brand with incredible guests that we can all learn from. I'm so excited to be hearing you show up for Chat About Brand and for the new Twitter Space, which I guess I probably need to come up with a name now. And it's going to be great. And thank you all for being a part of it. And it's going to be an exciting year. Thanks. Bye.